Hello, and welcome to the mentorDINO podcast. I'm your host, Caitlin Rossier. I am an architect and founder of mentorDINO. Join me each week as I speak with amazing professionals in and around the architecture, engineering, and construction industry, as we are all part of a larger interconnected community. We discuss everything from career stories, lessons learned, and advice for others finding their own unique career path. Thank you to all of our current subscribers, and if you're new, welcome to the conversation. And if you like this episode, please do me a favor by hitting subscribe, like, or share it with a friend. It really helps others be able to discover this resource and support them on their own unique career journey. On this week of the mentorDINO podcast, I would like to welcome Cherise Lakeside, Senior Specification Writer at RDH Building Science and host of Arcat's detailed podcast out in Portland, Oregon. Thank you, Cherise, for taking the time to speak with me today.
Thank you for being crazy enough to have me. Should be a fun chat.
It should be fantastic. So before we dive in, I know I met you way earlier in the year, took your course, met you at AIA National, but not everybody else may know who you are. So if you don't mind introducing yourself to let my listeners know a little bit about your experience and journey so far in your education and career.
Okay, well, like you said, I'm Cherise Lakeside. I am currently the Senior Spec Writer at RDH Building Science. I think we have, I'm not going to remember this right, so hopefully they don't listen, 12 offices, 11 or 12 offices in the US and Canada. And I am the spec writer for all of those offices right now. And I love it. It's another new discipline. I started in this industry actually when I was a senior in high school at a construction company. Worked there for about a year, went off and did my young 20s thing. And when I was 20, I got my first job in an architecture firm. And I ended up working there for 22 years, I believe, and pretty much did everything in that firm but draw. I'm not an architect. I did everything else. We closed this thing in 2008. The recession hit. Two of the three principals there had retired, and the last one was getting pretty close to retirement age, and nobody was working during the 2008 recession, so shut the office down. I wandered off for a while doing other things because nobody was working, and then went back to work a few years later in MEP Engineering, writing specs in MEP Engineering. So that was fun, going from architecture to working for the MEP engineers that were our MEP engineers at that firm for the last 22 years. Spent 6 or 7 years there, and then came back to the architecture side and worked for a large firm here in Portland, and then another more medium-sized firm in Vancouver, Washington. And then I came to RDH Building Science. So I've kind of jumped. I keep joking with people in presentations that I jumped to the dark side, but I won't tell anybody which discipline is the dark side. You have to just guess.
Yeah, because you've been on kind of every side of the industry when looking at the full length of your career.
Almost, because even though I've never worked for an owner, I've provided services to owners lots of times throughout my career where it felt like I was working for them. But I think that if somebody were to ask me, what is the most valuable thing you think you've done in your career that's helped you, have the journey that you've had? And I would say it was actually jumping ship and working in different areas of the industry. Because I don't think I look at specs the same way a lot of people do. Because I have some insight from the contractor's side and what they do with those documents when they get them from me. And I have some insight to what's missing when architects are communicating with their engineers and why problems may happen there. And I didn't get that insight until I went from architecture to MEP engineering and found out, and I've told this story a number of times, but I had to sit there and have what I call a little come to God moment with myself. Because I had spent 22 years complaining about how come the engineers don't know how to do their documents. And this is so frustrating, and just complaining about engineers. And then I went to work for an engineer and I went, oh gosh, I was the problem all along. It wasn't the engineers, it was me. And I didn't know what level of exposure they had to the documents until I went to work on that side. And it's like, oh, okay. This is a game changer. That was a game-changing moment for me in my career, and part of what led to all the teaching and everything that I do now. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey and continues to be an interesting journey.
Yeah, I know I always try to explain to young professionals as they start their career on just the engineers aren't in every meeting with the owner like we are. If the owners wants to redesign a little quadrant of the project, if the engineers aren't on that call, you better go call them, or at least send them an email with a screenshot, or call, leave a message, and send an email, just so they know, because odds are that's the first spot they're going to start designing. And if you knew about that for weeks, like that's time wasted on their end. So you almost have to over communicate if they're not going to be pulled into every meeting, but you don't want to get pulled into every meeting either, or else that just kills all your time.
Well, I think the architects need to remember that they are the hub of the wheel. It is their responsibility to make sure all the right parties have the right information. When I was working in MEP, I saw some crazy things where the day before a deadline on a large project, the architect sends over all these revised ceiling plans. Well, none of the ductwork fits now.
Mm-hmm.
That requires a ton of redesign for the mechanical engineers, and to get that the day before a deadline, it's just wrong. It really is. And so knowing what and when you need to communicate things in the most effective way. Efficiency is my superpower. You give me anything to do and it takes 10 steps and I'm going to do it in 3 out of order and still get to the same place, or else I'll go insane. So I think like everything in this business, it comes down to appropriate communication and actually having that communication, actually asking the question. And you have to learn enough outside of design to be dangerous enough to ask the right questions.
Yeah. As soon as you know exactly how somebody needs information, it can be dangerous.
Yes.
But sticking with the topic of working on the different sides of the industry, what has been some challenges? Because architecture MEP is different disciplines. So if I think of specs, I think, okay, you're transitioning to different divisions. But now you're also on like the building envelope side and building science. So the level of what you're doing changes at that point, I would assume.
It does. I think the biggest challenge, it's not writing the specs. Writing specs is writing specs. Once you really learn how to write specs, you can approach anything and figure out how to put it together. But I remember going to MEP, and this was valuable, quick training for me. My first job at that firm before I actually started writing project specs was to rewrite their master. Every word, every line, every section. I'm looking at terminology I've never even seen before. Like, what is this? So I was doing a lot of research, a lot of looking up of course, absolutely nothing's popping in my head right now, but some, variable
testing
frequency or different systems and equipment and all the things that MEP does. Types of wire. Oh my goodness. That's just its own little adventure. And so I had to start figuring out what these things were so what I was writing would make sense to me. Doesn't mean that I had to become an MEP engineer or be an expert. They have to know how to design their project. They just have to be able to appropriately communicate those pieces and parts that I need to know to write their spec. But if you've never even seen the word before, it shows how much I read my MEP specs before I moved to MEP. That was another lesson. So I think the hardest part is in the building science, architects historically have designed all those pieces and parts of the building. But our buildings have become more and more complicated. How tight your building is has become more and more important, and energy usage and all of the sustainable standards to, try to have healthier, better buildings. And building science and building enclosure consultants, at least the one I have worked for, just take it to this whole different level that I never saw an architect even think about digging into testing reports or going and building a part of the building and doing all these different experiments on it to make sure it's watertight, that it's airtight, that it's, really going to keep the heat in or keep the cold out or whatever. Science is a really good word for this piece of the industry because they really take it to a level of excellence, really, that I'd never seen before. And I'm not faulting architects, sorry, but they really, they make sure it's going to do what they say it's going to do. And so that's been, I love that. I love that about this phase of my career and working in this discipline is we're going to, still with the client's budget in mind, you always have to have that. We are going to design the best possible building we can design. And it's kind of nice not having every single little thing be, about the last penny, because the owner benefits in the long run, with less maintenance and repairs on the building, better energy efficiency, or, less catastrophic failures because things are leaking. Water is one of the worst things in the world for a building. So I think that's just been the biggest challenge, is understanding how that particular discipline works and how they look at things and what's important to them, because it's different in every different discipline you cross to, where their focus really is, and making sure you understand that well enough that I can then create the documents they need for the project they're designing.
Yeah, and ask the right questions along the way.
Absolutely. And that's really all this business is about. People have such misconceptions about spec writers in multiple different ways. Cranky old guy in the corner is the first one everybody has. And I think I'm the least cranky person on the planet most of the time. And they have this assumption that we know everything about every product on the planet. It could not be further from the truth. What we are really, really, really good at doing is asking the right questions and doing the research. There's no way, I don't care how smart you are, there is no way any one human could fit all the information we have to deal with. And that's just talking about products. Then you have to go into installation and administrative procedures and all the contractual requirements. There's a lot we have to know. And you can't know it all.
Yeah.
But you can know the questions to ask and how to get to the answer you need for whatever the particular thing is you're dealing with.
Yeah. I remember one of my best mentors was a senior spec writer. He recently retired, and I still text him questions. But I remember when I started out, I just thought he knew everything. And the more I went to CSI events with him and working with him and seeing how he interacts with the rest of the staff, it's like, oh, no, he just knows how to ask questions, and then he has resources. He knows who to call to ask the particular questions if it's something on a particular product or system. And he also could bring in professionals at the right time for lunch and learns, which I will never understand how he was that magical. It was always timing lunch and learns with different project teams coming in. So then they could automatically connect and figure out a spec the same day they're there for a lunch and learn. I'm like, how did he balance all of that and know like who's where, when, and all the moving parts? So
He was
I thought
probably
it was
lucky
magical.
in that respect. Excuse me. Do I know him?
Bob Bailey. It's out in Pittsburgh.
I do. We have an architect here in Portland, CSI, Melody Fontenot.
Mm-hmm. She was a guest on a previous episode.
Yeah. She, for a while, was trying to hook up a meeting with me, her, and Bob Bailey to talk about some things, and we just haven't got it done yet. So I've heard of him. I don't know him personally.
Yeah. I'll have to get you in touch because he's fun to talk to.
I've heard that.
So you'll never know where your conversation's going to go with him. And definitely one of those architects that when you walk around and then they just start meandering and touching things and going off, it's him to a T.
That's so funny you say that, because I tell people all the time, don't ever go to lunch with an architect, because it will take you 3 hours to get to the restaurant, because they're going to stop and, oh, look at this detail. They're going to pick every building you walk by apart. Or wait, what's this? Or I got to touch that. Drives me insane.
Yep. I try not to do that, or else my husband would probably never take me anywhere again. But one other question I had before we jumped off the theme of working on different sides of the industry. Have you seen a common theme with professionals' knowledge or lack of knowledge in specs? I know you mentioned moving to the MEP side really launched you into the education and teaching professionals, specs, and young professionals. So I wasn't sure if there's a theme that you'd like to say.
There is a theme, and really it's, I don't know that it applies to any one discipline, except for I think that any engineering or consulting firm is a little even more disconnected. The design schools, whether it's an engineering school or an architecture school, typically don't teach project delivery or contractual requirements or specifications. There might be a professional practice class, and they might touch on a few of these things. But what I've seen over and over again throughout my career, which has been longer than we're going to talk about, is, young people coming out of school, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and ready to work hard, and they're smart as all get out, but they have no clue what the real world looks like. And I've talked to architecture professors and different designers in architecture schools, and they always say, we don't have time to teach them all of that. We have in 5 years, we need to make them understand design. And so we are counting on their firms to teach them that in real world experience. So here's my complaint. Where did your firm learn? Typically, they didn't. And I call it the cycle of abuse. I think I even said that in class. The cycle of abuse in our industry. You had some mentor teach you something, and because they were older and wiser than you, you took it as the gospel. But they never learned right in the first place. So we've just been repeating the same mistakes over and over again. And that's a common theme everywhere. The engineers have it even worse because they get nothing at all in school. Architects might get a little glimmer, and they might be lucky enough to go to work for a firm that has a spec writer, a trained spec writer. There's a lot of spec writers also out there that are just, they were an architect who somebody said, okay, now you get to be our spec writer. So they might have access to people a little bit more that might show them some of the right things and help reduce that risk. Engineers don't, and the architects are falling down in helping their engineers understand what they need to know. Because their focus as engineers, well, we've all seen it in MEP specs, mechanical general requirements. So that's not really a thing. It's not really, you can create it, but it shouldn't address anything but mechanical things. But usually you will see that spec full of things like submittal requirements, responsibility of the architect to decide that in Division 1, cutting and patching, temporary facilities, all kinds of things that they started, I call it CYA language, and I've seen it at every MEP firm specs that I've looked at. They put in what I call CYA language because something went wrong on some project at some point. And the architect didn't coordinate it with them. And they got burned because, we know what rolls downhill. So they got burned and told, you should have known better. And so they went and put this language in their specs, all kinds of things that are the architect's job, fireproofing, access panels. I actually have a list I use to coordinate
to cross-check.
projects. These are the things that engineers need to be coordinated with your engineers or consultants. And so they have been building and building these specs over the years. And then stuff goes south and everybody's going, well, why don't you know what you're doing? Well, that's not fair to the engineers. Nobody ever told them at any point any of these things. And so we just keep making the same mistakes. We have the same top 5 risks in design that we had 50 years ago. That tells you something. And so I run around screaming at the top of my lungs, hey, there's some things you need to know. But one of me isn't enough. So I would say that's a common theme is there's not enough real world stuff that you have to deal with on a project and you have to understand taught before you ever get to your firm. And then it's not being taught appropriately in the firms. Yeah,
because I know I haven't worked on the MEP side, but even just looking at architecture programs, and it's, if you even get professional practice, it may be in your master's. So you're over 4 years in at that point to your college education. You may already have had internships, and you're just now learning how contracts, practice, and professional development all kind of comes together. And a lot of the times I've also seen people not even understand spec divisions. At a very high level, here's numbers and how things are organized. There's nothing.
I had at a previous firm, I have taught, besides teaching the CDT education program for CSI, I've also taught it in my firms. The previous architecture firm I worked in, I won't call anybody out. I was teaching the class in 2 different offices. So driving back and forth between the 2 cities every week to teach a class. And I had a young lady, she was PMing her first project. And she said, can I ask you a question? I've had something like, we're like 2 weeks into the construction phase of this project, or a month in, and I've had like 40 substitution requests. And is there any, the contractor just bombarding me with them? And I'm spending so much of our time, which we all know in design, you make the least amount of your money during construction because it's spread out over such a long period of time. So is there anything that I can do to get them to dial it back? And I was like, you can start by reading your specs, the specs you put out for the project. And I wasn't faulting her. I knew nobody told her. I said, it's already covered. And I know this because I wrote your spec. And what that contractor is doing is taking advantage of the fact that you're young and inexperienced. You don't, even if you have looked at your specs, you've probably only looked at the technical sections. And they know this. And I'm not saying all contractors are bad because they're not. I know a lot of really amazing contractors. But they know this. If you go look in the spec, I will tell you what it says. Substitution requests aren't allowed during construction. Only under a couple of very specific conditions. That's what my specs say. So you can tell them to take a flying leap off a short pier. I'm not going to spend hours of my time reviewing this. We did our work during design. The products we've chosen are the ones we want. And unless that product's not made anymore, or the plant close by burned down, or there is substantial cost savings to the owner, we're not even going to look at it. And I asked her, I said, how much money have you gotten back for the owner on these 40 substitution requests that you've approved, researched and approved? Nothing. They said it was a no-cost change. So do you want me to tell you? It is not a no-cost change. What they're doing is getting extra profit out of you while they're wasting all your CA time.
Yep. Or they can only do substitution requests during bidding. I've had that in my specs where it's that's the only time, and you got to submit a form. Or they send full shop drawings when I didn't identify shop drawings in the specification section. So I love turning those back and be like, not reviewing. Not
required. But you have to know that you can do that. Yep. And you have to understand what a spec is, what it covers, why it covers, where it covers. And if you understand the basics, and I tell people, they're like, I can't learn to become a spec writer. Nobody is telling you to learn to. You need to be dangerous enough to ask the right questions. And it's a game changer. And it's why I love teaching the class you took, because I get, I'm 12 years in, I think, teaching this class, and I still get emails from students from years ago going, guess what happened today? Because I knew to do this, or I knew to look here, or I knew to ask this person this question. So that's the biggest travesty in our industry is I think our education programs are really not setting up our young people coming into the industry, nor have they ever, for success in what it actually takes to put out a project besides just designing it.
Yeah, because I know as much as I love Bob Bailey as my mentor, I think I learned the most about spec writing through the mistakes I made and learning it in construction.
Right.
And you shouldn't need to do that. And some of them were, me being naive young professional and just fly through stuff and not knowing to ask the question. And then eventually, why didn't you ask the question? It's like, oh, well, sorry. You're just trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
But
well, and that's just it. I mean, this is a lifelong learner industry. I don't care what discipline you're in or what your role is. If you ever wake up one morning going, okay, I know it all, please get out of the business because you're dangerous. Things are changing constantly. You're always learning new things. So if there's a way we could make people not have to make some of those mistakes, I'm all a fan for that. I used to tell my kids the same thing. When I'd give them advice and they go, oh, Mom, you got to let me make my own mistakes. I was like, sweetheart, you're going to make plenty. But maybe I learned a thing or two over my life that maybe there's one or two you couldn't make or you don't need to make. You know?
Every person doesn't have to make the same mistake year after year.
Well, when our top 5 risks in the industry are the same for 50 years, we're not ever learning not to make those mistakes because they haven't changed.
Yeah. Do you have the top 5 memorized?
Oh, you're going to ask me to do that. I'm not. I'm going to forget something. One is failure to supervise inexperienced employees. One is conflicts, errors, and omissions in your contract documents. I think they call it improperly coordinated contract documents. One is failure to communicate effectively with your consultants and engineers. I can't remember the other 2 off the top of my head.
Hey, you got 3.
I always have to look at the list. Those are the 3 big ones that are the most important to me. But all 5 are important, and all 5 are, if I could remember the other 2 off the top of my head, you would go, yep, as we're ticking every single one of them off.
Even those 3, I'm like, yeah, and I can probably list off 3 things for each of those of something I've messed up in my career. So,
and we all can. But we could be doing so much better. That's what drives me crazy. I don't expect everybody to know it all, but we could be doing just with basic knowledge that nobody ever, I don't know how many people walked out of my class going, wow, how did I not know that? Things like submittals and not having to review things you didn't ask for and not asking for things you shouldn't be asking for. Safety data sheets. Those should not be in your specifications because you're not qualified to review them. Things, just dumb little things like that are all over the place, but nobody knows that.
Yeah. That's
I spent my whole career fixing that. All of those things in specs as people try to put them in.
Yeah. I think Bob beat that into my head with not looking at MSDS paperwork as it was coming in. But that was one of the main reasons why I started mentorDINO. I just kept seeing the same mistakes or people getting frustrated or these long hours or crazy last minute changes that if communication was fixed or if we just taught people to have a little bit of a baseline, how much further and better could our buildings be and careers be in the profession if you had a better like pedestal to stand on to start and not have to figure out how to get on top of the pedestal.
I have to say that I appreciate every firm I've worked for. I've gone to the senior management and said, so I teach this class. It's a 12-week class, 2 hours a week. I know I'm asking for a lot of time, but it'll be a game changer for your staff. And I've received support from every firm. And in a couple of the firms, I taught it more than once. I didn't just, it wasn't one and done. Got new people, a year's gone by and taught it again. And they even bought lunches. I mean, all kinds of things to encourage their people to attend. And you know how it is. Most senior people are often really busy. So you end up with more of the staff, but a lot of those senior people never learned right. So it was really fun to finish this class and have the more junior staff go back, and then their boss tells them to do something and they're going,
no.
Cherise said no. Here's why. Here's why we don't do that. And they don't know that. I think I love those moments when the younger people came back and said, I taught my boss something today.
Yeah, because teaching can come from every direction.
It does. And when that's the hope is if enough people learn, they'll all be teaching each other. And eventually maybe those top 5 risks will change.
Maybe.
I can hope. I'm really optimistic person. And I don't know, that'll probably kill me someday, but I can hope.
Yeah. But I want to pivot into the CDT exam and everything you do with CSI. So CSI, the Construction Specifications Institute, has a series of exams and does not mean that you want to go be a spec writer to go take one of their exams. I know I studied for the CDT in the spring and passed, and so that's the Construction Document Technologist. I was studying for the CCCS, but then I was like, I'm going to take a break, and I wanted more practice before it. But for the CDT exam, what have you learned from teaching those courses over the years? As much as you teach professionals, what have you learned?
Oh, wow. We don't have time for this. I've learned a lot of things, and my CSI journey's been a little weird because I came into CSI far later than most people in CSI. So I just had my, I think, 13th anniversary. I won't tell you how old I was when I joined CSI, but it was well into my career. And a lot of the people, not everybody, we have young people in CSI as well, but a lot of the people that I know that are kind of sitting in the place I'm sitting in CSI have been in 25 years, 30 years, 35 years. I think our Portland chapter was started in we're about to have our 60th anniversary. So I can tell you that chapter started before I was born. And so I came in really, really late because I was raising a family. I was raising 4 kids. I had a full-time job, busy kids. I didn't think I had time for CSI. Even though my boss had been telling me for years, you really should get involved in CSI. And that's one of my biggest, I don't believe in regrets. They're lessons, but I wish I would have done it when I was younger because it brought so much to my career. Just being a part of CSI, teaching the CDT has done a lot of reinforcing how much people don't know out there that they need to know. And I love working with younger professionals, and I wouldn't be where I'm at now in my career if it weren't for the mentors that I had. That first firm I worked at, I was 20 when I started working there, and they hired me to answer the phone. And I worked for 3 partners that were willing to teach me anything I wanted to know. And I don't like being bored, so I wanted to know everything. And that was a game changer and continues to be a game changer for me every day that anything I went to them with, oh, why do we do this? What is this? What does this mean? And so I feel a responsibility to give that back. And I take that responsibility super personally because I know how much it changed the course of my whole career in their mentorship. Now, if I would have listened to them when I was 20 and not waited till way, way, way later, I would have joined CSI, and I would think I might be queen of the world right now had I done that. I didn't, so I don't get the crown because I didn't listen. But being a part of an organization, CSI or any organization, really opens, especially these days. I started when we had one Radio Shack computer on a desk, and you had to write code to make a line bold. Now we can interact with people all over the world like you and I are right now in two completely different cities. I didn't have that when I was younger. And your network just expands and your mentors expand. Like I could go ask my bosses all kinds of things, but that firm did schools. We did a lot of public work, which, by the way, is a great way to make sure you know how to do everything in contract documents. Do some public work. But they couldn't answer questions about other types of work. For me, that's all they had ever done was schools. Having this network that you can call, and then CSI is all disciplines. It's not spec writers. So let's just get that fallacy out of the way right now. And they don't, while there is a certification to be a certified construction specifier, they don't teach just specifications. They teach project delivery and contract administration and construction administration and spec writing. And you have all disciplines in a room when you go to a meeting. I learn every single time I go to a meeting or a conference or an event. You know, I might have a contractor standing there and an engineer and an architect. And I said, okay, so I just encountered this. I want all three of you to give me your point of view. And you get three completely different answers from that perspective that really helps you make a better choice on how you're going to move forward with whatever it is you're working on. And I have people all over the country that I can pick up the phone at any time and say, hey, I need a little help. I have no idea what I'm doing, or I don't understand how this works. And I know that this is a specialty for you. So I have learned to expand my borders. If anything, from CSI, and to not be in a tunnel, not be in just, the architecture bubble or just the engineering bubble, because everything we do in CSI is all disciplines involved. And that's been probably the biggest game changer in my career. So I don't look at anything with that tunnel vision ever.
Now, this is probably more me knowing more the Pittsburgh chapter, which we are very small. But when I've gone, I've only seen product reps, architects, and architectural spec writers. There's that gap of, I don't see engineers going or engineering products, but I feel like, I don't know if it's just small city and they should be there, or if it is really geared towards the architectural side.
I think that you're going to see more architects in some of the other disciplines at a CSI meeting, but I also think that the variety of people you have at a meeting is wholly dependent on the chapter and the resources that it has. We happen to have a pretty large chapter. I know a number of years ago, we were the third largest chapter in the country. I don't know where we sit now, but I'm sure we're still in the top three. We also have a very, very dynamic, close group in our chapter that is a bunch of just crazy committed professionals. So we're constantly thinking outside the box, like having joint meetings with ASHRAE, or, we have as a matter of fact, it's tomorrow night and I can't go and I'm really sad. We have a December ugly sweater party that's totally geared around nothing but young professionals. And we invite, I don't know how many they invited this year. We've gone as high as 12 different industry associations in the area. We have one big party with a bunch of other organizations. And then we ask all the more senior people to come to the party as well, because we want to create an atmosphere. It's totally a party. It's not, it's all fun. There's no presentation or no education at this particular meeting, but we want to bring all these different disciplines, senior people in the same room with all these different disciplines, younger people. Make some connections, find some mentors. Maybe you're a young architect and you meet up with an older mechanical engineer, you make friends, and now you have somebody you feel you can call if you're trying to tackle something and you need advice. We do a lot of stuff like that, but every chapter is different. And some smaller chapters struggle a little bit more or have less resources, or sometimes they call it voluntelling you to do things. Some chapters have had the same leadership for a really long time and maybe haven't worked as hard to bring in younger people. And sometimes people are just tired and doing what they already know. So it depends on the chapter. We also have a virtual chapter. It's called CSI Next, because not everybody has a chapter close to them. So that is also an option for people who want to become involved in CSI, don't have a chapter nearby, or maybe it's one of the really small chapters that can't do as much, or they can do both. But that's another way, and that's getting all over the country.
Yep, expanding your network.
Yeah. So it's you hear different things about any organization from city to city. I always tell people, if you really want to rock the free world, move to Portland. Come hang out with us. That's what I told Melody. And look, now she lives here.
And now she's there because she was in Oklahoma.
She was in Oklahoma. The first time I met Melody, I told her, oh, you so need to live in Portland. And not only did she move to Portland, but I officiated her and her husband's wedding.
Next level of connections.
Level. Yeah, exactly. We're out there in Portland.
Yeah. And you're an officiant. You may not be the queen of CSI, but I know you also go as the CSI Kraken. So where did that come from?
I keep telling myself I'm going to somehow lose that moniker, but I don't think it's going to be possible. It was a silly thing. Again, I've only been in CSI for 13 years, and I started in CSI by taking the CDT class, and I got cornered by two senior, longtime CSI members, fellows, and they're like, you need to be on our board. I had not even been to a CSI meeting yet. And I'm like, are you guys, I don't even know who you are. I have no idea what you do. I'm just looking to get my CDT certification. Well, I ended up on the board. Within 6 months, I was on the board. And I was at one of my very first board meetings. And I had decided, which is unusual for me, to be kind of quiet the first couple board meetings and just see
what's going on.
Yeah, you don't open your big mouth when you don't understand how the world works. And so I think I was quiet for a meeting and a half. And I don't remember what the topic was that came up. They were debating it ad nauseum. And again, with efficiency being my thing, I want to get it done. I want to get it done now, and I want to do it really well, and then move on. Thing. Yeah. And I said, hey, do you mind if, can I offer a comment? And so I said, what about you do this and you do this and you do this, you do this. Nobody does too much work. We'll have this done, get it done by this. I just threw out some ideas. And the president at the time, Skip Brown, love you, Skip, who I didn't know from Adam, except for he was the president of our chapter. I didn't know him personally. He kind of muttered under his breath, because another one of my cohorts in Portland CSI got involved in this conversation as well. So her and I were just both throwing this stuff back and forth. Okay, we're done. And he goes, oh my God, release the Kraken. And it just stuck. So I'm like, okay, if they're going to start calling me that, I'm going to start tweeting with hashtag CSI Kraken on everything I tweet. I even did a full year, 365 days of inspiring professional messages once a day. CSI Kraken rule number 1. It was just, I added it to everything. And then somebody got the bright idea. We need Kraken. We need a logo. So the Portland chapter got a logo, and then we got Kraken committee sweatshirts. And then we went to the national convention, the little ribbons you get to put on your name tags at the conventions.
Yeah.
We got CSI Kraken ribbons, and you only got one if we thought you were a Kraken. We turned it into this kind of, what it was meant to be is a motivational kind of movement.
Mm-hmm.
Go big or go home. Take things that haven't been right and make them better. And it just kind of picked up a life of its own, and it has not left me yet.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
So, but, and you also mentioned that you're CSI fellow. So what's the process to become a fellow with CSI?
I think somebody was drinking that day.
It just said, Kraken, go.
It's quite the process. I think completing my fellowship application, I had 2 fellows who were mentors, took about 6 months to do everything for it. And so you can't even think about applying to become a fellow till you've been in CSI a minimum of 5 years. Nobody applies at 5 years. They apply at 20 years or 25 years. And so they approached me after my 5th anniversary and said, we want to mentor you and we think you should become a fellow. And I basically said, I think you're high. There is no way, these are the best of the people who do what I do. I've been in the organization 5 years. There's no way. And I turned them down, which they could not even understand, like how I could possibly think I could do that. I'm just like, no, it's going to be humiliating because I've been in 5 years. And so they came at me again the next year and said, you don't have a choice. Because again, with my go big or go home kind of attitude, in the short time I've been in, I've done an awful lot of things. And so they just told me, you're doing it whether you like it or not. So it was probably a 4 to 6 month process to get that application filled out. You have to have all the information of everything that you've done, because fellowship is, in CSI we have a lot of committed members that do a lot of hard work. In their opinion, they're looking for people who've moved the needle,
mm-hmm.
who have done something substantially outside the borders of all the hard work we all do in our chapters. And so we got it done, and I had every intention of not becoming a fellow, because I know people have been turned down 2-3 times after being in for 20 years doing all kinds of things. So I didn't hold a lot of thought it was going to happen. And I think I got a call at work at like Tuesday morning, and I was on the CSI national board at the time. And the woman that called me was on the board with me. So I thought she was calling me about board business. And she said, congratulations. I said,
what'd I do?
Yeah. For what? It totally I didn't know that they had board members call you to congratulate you. So I was expecting a call from completely different people. And she said, well, you're going to become our next fellow. And they suspect I might be. They don't have every single record back to the beginning of time, but they suspect I could be the shortest tenured fellow in the history of CSI. And so now I am a fellow. I mean, I'm really proud of it. I'm very proud of it. And I have worked really hard, but it still feels like somebody was drinking that day.
Yeah, just surreal. Like, yeah. I couldn't have done that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I just didn't think I had anywhere near enough to even put on that application. But a piece of advice I got at that very first class from those same 2 guys that cornered me, one of them said, you're going to be a fellow someday. And I'm giving you a piece of advice now to save you when that time comes. Keep track of every single thing you do in this organization, outside of it, in the industry, even outside the industry. And well, I thought he was absolutely crazy. I seriously didn't even know who these people were. I took his advice to heart. I thought, well, that's not bad advice just for resumes or, whatever. And I think
keeping track of projects you worked on.
You know, and I would say just my list of speaking engagements, and it's just the title of whatever event I was at, is 15 or 16 pages long. And, not including, like it'll just say CDT class. It won't list all 12 classes that I've done twice a year for who knows how long. So when I put that all together, I was like, oh, okay, maybe I've done a few things, a few more things that I thought. It's like, when did I sleep?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I am super, super proud of that.
No, but delayed congratulations.
Thank you. Well, I think last time I saw the numbers, only 8 or 9% of CSI fellows are women. Because historically this has been a male-dominated industry. That's changing a lot now. So there was an extra added bit of pride walking up there on the stage in my ball gown to get my medal that I was representing for the girls.
Yep. And I know beyond CSI and working as a spec writer, you're also the host of Arcat's Detailed podcast. So where did collaborating with Arcat and hosting their podcast come from?
That's a good question. So, I told you about my whole CSI Kraken inspirational things on Twitter and just really super, super involved on social media again, as a result of going to a CSI meeting. I thought social media was stupid, waste of time. Joy Davis, who used to work for CSI, was doing a presentation. I told her that. She said, no, come. And then you tell me if you think that when I'm done with you. And she changed my mind and I started getting involved on social media. And so when you're involved on social media and you do it appropriately, once again, your borders expand, your network expands. You start meeting people if you are intelligently interacting with other professionals, which is what I was doing it for. Although on Twitter, I might have posted what I had for dinner last night or whatever on occasion, all of the effort was done on LinkedIn and on Twitter to connect with other people in the industry. And so that's how I originally got to know Mark LePage and Demetrius Lynch. Mark LePage, entree architect, but they also run Gable Media. And we had just connected here and there, commented on each other's posts for a long time. And then I got a message one day from Mark, and this had gone on for a number of years. Mark said, hey, do you think I could give you a call? I want to run something by you. And I said, sure, great. I get to talk to Mark in like hear a real voice, not just, written messages. And he called me up and he said, we're doing this Gable Media. Explain to me how they started this new PR company, kind of video and podcast production company specifically for architecture. And they said, Arcat has hired us to do all the things for a podcast for them. Cause that's not, their job is helping bring the designers and manufacturers together and getting all that information that I always need for my job. And they said, it's up to them, but we kind of thought you'd be a good host. And I don't know how many times during this interview I'm going to say, are you high? I said, I literally think I was going, who are you talking to? Looking around me like, is there somebody back there? And I said, yeah, I don't know. And I had previously done an effort called Let's Fix Construction. And we had done a handful of podcasts. And I think he had heard some of those. And I'm just like, I don't know. And he said, well, I said, I'll take a crack at it, but you're probably not going to like it. So, just maybe we do a trial run or something. He said, okay, well, Arcat has to approve you too. So then we had another meeting with Arcat and we talked about what this should look like. What did we want it to be about? I said, I really want to teach people something. I want to talk about cool projects, but I want people to learn something from that conversation. So we all agreed we'll do 10 episodes and see if any of us want to continue after that. And 117, I think, are released now. 117, two and a half years later. Here we are, still doing it. None of this has been something, again, there's another piece of advice for anybody in the industry. Don't be closed-minded. I always tell the younger people, don't let fear stand in your way, because I spent so many years of my career being worried about whether I would fail or what people would think, or all these things that all of us go through at some level. And about 10 years ago, I just said, I don't care anymore. I do care, but I don't care in that way anymore. I'm going to do the things I want to do. And if I fall on my face, I'll get up, laugh, brush off, and do it again. And best decision I ever made to kind of let go of other people's expectations and just do me. I think I'm a pretty good person, and I care about people, and I care about doing good things in the world. So I'm just going to do me. And if somebody doesn't like that, there's other people to go like. I'm good with that. And it just, I don't know, it just seemed to click. I love getting to talk to all the different, mostly architects, but I also do the mini interviews with manufacturers when I'm at AIA or at Greenbuild. I get to meet all kinds of really interesting people, hear about some of the craziest things with projects. I learn something every day. I know my listeners are learning, because I have complete strangers walk up to me and go, "Are you Cherise from the Detailed podcast?" Which still weirds me out. And so we all agreed, yeah, let's do it. And it's an amazing team. The team at Gable make my job easy, because I always tell everybody I get to do all the fun stuff. They do all the hard work. And Arcat is an amazing owner of the podcast. They give me so much license again they're like, you're the one that does what you do. We trust you. You do you. 'Cause I told them, I said, if you're looking for Barbara Walters and somebody who's going to be perfectly well behaved and not worry about pushing boundaries a little bit to get an answer, I would never ask my guests anything that make them uncomfortable. But what about this, or what about that, or can you tell me more about this? I love being able to do that. And usually I'm totally nervous every episode for about the first 60 seconds. And then I forget we are even recording an episode. And we're just neck deep in this conversation about whatever project we're talking about. And it's turned out to be something I absolutely love. But I tweeted my way into it, is the short answer to that. And another example of really expanding your borders and being open-minded and not being afraid to talk to people you don't know.
Yeah.
Who knows where that's going to be?
Yeah.
It's led all kinds of crazy places for me.
I can resonate with that feeling, because I never thought I'd ever host a podcast or have a website or do things. Like, people will stop me and be like, "Oh, you're the Dino person." I'm like, okay, yes, but wasn't expecting it. But I remember blogging to start out my career, and getting people to write and do guest posts took a lot of effort. And then after I started mentorDINO, I happened to get called in to be on podcasts, and I was like, oh, they actually want to talk to me? Like, I have something to say? And a lot of them recommended I start my own podcast, and it took a couple of them all saying the same thing, that I'm like, yeah, because I want to tell stories. As much as you tell stories on projects, I find those career journeys and stories that failure is okay, pivoting your career, learning from different sides of the industry, that people are so amenable to have a conversation. And I remember the first couple episodes, I'd put a Post-it note up over my face. So if anybody has it recorded, it's a lot like Zoom meetings. And I'd put a Post-it note over my face to not look at myself and do all these different things. I'd be so nervous getting into these discussions. And because I reach out to people blind, that a lot of the times my first time meeting them is on the podcast. And I actually get more nervous interviewing the people I already know than I do the people who I don't know at all. And it's amazing to see. I'm only at the end of year 1, so seeing how that's been for you for 2.5 years, I'm excited to see the years to come.
It's funny too, because I'm just the opposite. I'm not nervous with the people. I love people. I love just connecting with people. I truly forget I'm on the podcast about 60 seconds in. But when I'm recording my sound bites, where it's just me and the video The video, yeah. Demetrius knows how I feel about the video. We didn't have video at first. We were about a year and a half in before we started adding in the YouTube videos. But when it's just me and the screen, and I only do a short part on video, and then I do a bunch of audio sound bites.
Mm-hmm.
I feel so stiff, and it doesn't matter. I have pasted up pictures of all my CSI friends around me, so
pretend
I can
you're in a room.
That people energy is what really fires me up. And recording this, I've tried every which way to midnight. And I know when I'm recording those sound bites and reading that intro, I sound like I'm reading something. And I know it. And I've tried actually swearing right before I start to screw it. Just go and say it. I've tried all kinds of things, and I can never seem to find that same feel or vibe that I get when I'm talking to another person when I'm recording the intros. And so I get all wound up before I have to do those every single time.
Yeah.
117 episodes later, I should not be batting an eye, right?
I hate reading them. Even the questions that I plan ahead of time, I will always ask them in different directions. And I actually, on my end, will bold text. So I know context clues. Okay, I got to ask a question about this. But I send my questions ahead of time so you guys can see them. But I can't read and do this. I'm like, it feels too inauthentic. I like this being more of a coffee chat, or we're out for drinks and just having a conversation. So
see, this is why we get along so well. I tell my guests right before every episode, here's what you need to know. We are pretend like we're at happy hour with a great, really good glass of whiskey, sitting at a table in some bar talking about your project. And none of those people out there exist. It's just you and me having a drink talking about your project. And I don't know why it works. It does. Oh, okay. I said, that's a vibe we're looking for. We're just talking about your project, and anybody else listening is just an eavesdropper.
Yep, exactly. Or the student right next door sitting and working on their project. Think of it that way.
Going, wait, I need to know that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I always like wrapping up my podcast with this final question. And I know we've kind of hit advice all along the way, but what advice do you have for young professionals just starting their career?
Yeah, I purposely did not let myself write anything down or really think about that question too much, because then we'd really be here for like another 3.5 hours.
This could be 2 episodes, and the last episode is just one question.
Yeah. Truly, 2 things I think I would pick right off the top. Number 1, never let fear stand in your way. I don't know how many times in my teaching and mentoring and speaking, I've had a younger person come to me and ask me a question and preface it with, I know this is a stupid question, or I don't want to ask my boss this because it's a stupid question. And my answer is always, I've been asking stupid questions my entire career. There's no such thing as a stupid question. Don't be afraid. And I try to encourage these younger professionals that, if I've got 2 of you in front of me and one of you is asking the quote unquote stupid question and the other one's not asking a question at all, guess who's going to get promoted down the road? It's going to be the one that wasn't afraid to ask the question because they really wanted to get it right. And and unfortunately, I see that far more in young women than I see in young men. If you're working somewhere that you can't ask a stupid question, don't work there anymore. The other piece of advice is get out of your box. You will never become an amazing architect or an amazing engineer or amazing contractor or amazing product rep, for that matter, if you don't know how the other half lives. You need to understand more than just what you have to do, because at the end of the day, that building's not going up without all of us. Regardless of your role, regardless of your discipline, it's not going to happen. So get out of your box. Get to know people that you work with that are not a part of your office or not an architect. And, actually spend some time with them. And, go, if you're really motivated, ask if you can go shadow for a day or 2 and see how they work and what kinds of things they do. And or sit down and take them to lunch and tell me what are the things. I'm an architect. Tell me, mechanical engineer, what are the things I do that drive you insane? And don't be afraid of the answers, because it's a game changer in how you work. And all of a sudden, all those coming behind me, there's millennials are bigger than the baby boomers. Gen Z is bigger than millennials. So you got two generations, both bigger than the baby boomers, which was the biggest generation. Gen Alpha is 2.5 times the size of those two added together. You all have a lot of competition. And so what you want to do is, I have a presentation in my arsenal somewhere about setting yourself apart. You want to set yourself apart, and you're going to do that by stepping outside the lines, by understanding more about the industry than just this one little tiny narrow tunnel of a path that somebody is showing you. And being brave enough to say, hey, I've got an idea, or hey, can you explain this to me? I don't get it. So I would say, again, we could do another couple of hours on that topic, but those would be my two biggest pieces of advice: is don't be afraid and get out there in the world.
Yeah. And they kind of tie together, because oftentimes people are afraid to get out of their box or step out of their lane because of fear.
Exactly.
And the unknown. So you never know where it's going to take you. You didn't know a couple tweets would end up on a board, be a fellow, and do a podcast.
I seriously, the last 13 years, I could not have predicted the experiences, the trajectory, and the amazing people I've been able to meet, all the different things I've been able to do. And all of that came from kind of throwing that fear thing out the window and deciding that I think that if I'm in the wrong place, I won't stay there. If I need to be growing, I don't care how old I get. If I'm not growing all the time and I'm getting bored, then we're going to have a problem. And really finding that place that wants to empower you to grow and learn and encourages you to do so. And that's not always easy in this industry.
Yeah.
But I promise you it's worth it.
And I wanted to thank you for your time today to be able to share your story and so much advice. I know I learn from you every time that we get together, whether it be the class or running into an event. So I really appreciate your time, Cherise.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And I think since we are kindred spirits on so many things, that we should try to find a way to do a presentation together somewhere.
Yes, definitely.
I think that would
that'd
be
be so much fun.
Yeah. So let's talk about that offline. But thank you so much again for having me. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah. And I will leave links down below for your LinkedIn, because I know you post on LinkedIn all the time, the detailed podcast with Gabriel Brothers and Arcat, and the CSI Portland, because you do not have to be in Portland for your CDT exam, as I took your course and I'm all the way on the East Coast. And I think you had all the time zones covered. I'm sure you've covered all 50 states at this point.
My spring class starts January 30th. If anybody's interested in getting this education, the registration is open. I think my biggest class so far has been 108. And I have people from all over the United States in this class, and on occasion from a few other countries. I think my furthest one away so far was Saudi Arabia.
That's
if I remember correctly. I'm like, how did you even find me? But if you want to learn, you're welcome.
Yeah.
So it's open. It's all virtual, and it's from 5 to 7 Pacific time. So anybody in any time zone doesn't have to interfere with work to take the class.
Yeah, exactly. I know that's what I did. I would always grab a little glass of wine, sit down, and have a fantastic time.
Now I know what was going on over there.
Hey, just relax and learn something new every day. So, but thanks again, Cherise.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed our discussion today. Learn some advice to take with you and see how our industry is all tied together to create the world around us. Check out the description below for any links or resources we discussed. If you liked the episode, please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button. Give me a thumbs up and leave a comment below. It really helps others be able to discover this resource and support finding that career path that best works for them. If you know someone that has inspired your own career that you'd like me to interview, let me know in the comments below, or you can reach out to me via my website or LinkedIn. I'd be happy to share their story or your own. Thank you again, and I cannot wait for the next career story I get to share with you next week.